I'm Amber Nelson, 34 years old, and I'll never forget that Wednesday afternoon when my world shifted. While scrolling through Instagram, I saw my wealthy family's Mediterranean cruise photos juxtaposed with the realization that my neighbor Lillian Campbell was spending her 75th birthday completely alone. Lillian, the woman who'd been more of a mother to me than my own. I abandoned my important meeting and raced across Chicago to her doorstep, never imagining that what I discovered next would unravel decades of family secrets and break open the facade my parents had carefully maintained. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how one forgotten birthday exposed the truth that would change everything. My story with Lillian began exactly 8 years ago when I moved to Chicago after landing my first serious marketing job. The moving truck had just pulled away, leaving me surrounded by boxes in a neighborhood I barely knew. I was struggling with a particularly heavy bookshelf when I heard a warm voice call out, "You'll throw your back out that way, dear." That was Lillian Campbell, 77, silver-haired, with laugh lines that told stories of a life well lived. She didn't just offer advice. She rolled up her sleeves and helped, despite being more than twice my age. After we got the bookshelf positioned, she insisted I come over for dinner, saying no one should eat takeout on their first night in a new home. Her modest two-bedroom house stood in stark contrast to the sleek high-rise I'd moved from. Walking in felt like entering a time capsule. Furniture that had been lovingly maintained for decades, walls lined with photographs, and the smell of homemade bread that I later learned she baked weekly. That night over pot roast, I learned Lillian had lost her husband Harold 3 years prior after 50 years of marriage. They never had children, a fact she mentioned with a momentary flicker of sadness. Harold always said we had enough love for a dozen kids, she told me, but sometimes life has other plans. What started as a neighborly dinner became a weekly tradition. Every Sunday, I'd find myself at Lillian's table, sharing stories about my week while she offered wisdom wrapped in her characteristic directness. When my boyfriend of 2 years broke up with me via text 6 months after I moved in, it was Lillian's couch I cried on, not my parents who simply suggested I focus on my career instead. "Men who can't face you when things get hard aren't worth your tears," Lillian had said, passing me another tissue. "But you go ahead and cry them anyway. Sometimes washing your heart clean is necessary." She was right, as she usually was. And when I got passed over for a promotion I'd worked tirelessly for, Lillian didn't offer empty platitudes like my family. Instead, she poured 2 glasses of her late husband's prize scotch. "Harold saved this for special occasions," she explained, "and learning who doesn't value you properly is very special indeed." We'd spent every holiday together since I moved in. My family always had elaborate plans, skiing in Aspen, cruising the Caribbean, or jetting off to Europe, but they never extended invitations that included me unless I could take substantial time off work. Lillian never made me choose. Whether it was Thanksgiving dinner with her famous cranberry relish or watching fireworks from her small balcony on the 4th of July, she created traditions that made me feel like I belonged. For Christmas 2 years ago, my parents sent an expensive designer purse with a generic card signed by their assistant. Lillian gave me a hand-knitted scarf and a first edition of my favorite childhood book she'd tracked down through a friend who owned a used bookstore. The purse sits in my closet, barely used. I wear Lillian's scarf every winter. When I finally received that long-awaited promotion last year, my parents acknowledged it with a quick congratulatory text. Lillian, though, attended the office party, wearing her best dress and introducing herself proudly to my colleagues as practically family. She beamed with more pride than I'd ever seen from my actual mother. But I'm not blameless in what happened. After that promotion, my workload doubled. 60-hour weeks became my norm. My Sunday dinners with Lillian became bi-weekly, then monthly. Our phone calls shortened. I'd wave hurriedly when I saw her collecting her mail instead of stopping to chat. I told myself it was temporary, that once I established myself in the new role, I'd make more time. But time has a way of slipping through your fingers when you're not paying attention. For years, we'd celebrated our birthdays together. Nothing elaborate, just dinner and cake and genuine conversation. Lillian would insist on baking my favorite chocolate raspberry cake, and I'd always find a special gift that spoke to our connection. For her 74th birthday last year, I'd arranged a small gathering with some of her church friends and neighbors. Her smile that day was luminous, which makes what happened on her 75th all the more unforgivable. In my defense, the date hadn't completely slipped my mind. I'd marked it on my calendar, even ordered a gift online, a cashmere cardigan I knew she'd love but would never buy for herself. What I'd failed to do was recognize the significance of this particular birthday or anticipate how my family's latest escapade would illuminate my own failure in such a painful way. Sometimes the greatest betrayals happen not in moments of malice, but in moments of distraction. And I had been very, very distracted. To understand the full weight of what happened, you need to know about my family. The Nelsons of Lake Forest, Illinois, my parents Timothy and Diane, my older brother Jason, and his wife Megan, are what people politely call old money. Our family home is a 6-bedroom colonial on 2 acres. My father drives a new luxury car every year, and vacations are never domestic. I grew up with every material advantage and emotional disadvantage possible. My childhood closet held designer clothes. My childhood memories hold canceled dance recitals and empty seats at school plays. My parents built financial portfolios while failing to build connections with their children. Nelsons achieve, my father would say whenever I brought home anything less than perfect grades. We don't settle for average. This mindset extended to relationships. When I introduced them to my college boyfriend, a brilliant political science major on scholarship, my mother later asked if I was going through a charity phase. When I mentioned Lillian for the first time, describing our Sunday dinners, my father looked confused. You're spending time with an elderly neighbor? Is this some sort of community service for your resume? I stopped mentioning Lillian after that. My brother Jason followed the Nelson script perfectly. Ivy League education, married the daughter of one of my father's business associates, took his place in the family investment firm, and produced 2 photogenic children who are already enrolled in the right preschool. His wife Megan is cut from the same cloth as my mother, polished, poised, and perpetually planning their next status update. The cruise they were on when everything imploded was a 3-week Mediterranean extravaganza, Barcelona to Athens with every luxury port in between. The planning had consumed family conversations for months, though no one ever directly asked if I wanted to join. They knew I couldn't take that much time away from my new position, and asking would have obligated them to pretend they wanted me there. The morning of Lillian's birthday, my Instagram feed flooded with their updates. My mother in designer sunglasses on the deck of their suite, captioned, "Morning coffee with this view. #blessed." My brother and his wife posed with champagne flutes against a sunset in Santorini. Their children, my niece and nephew, building sandcastles on a private beach in Sicily, attended by what appeared to be a hired helper. Each photo was more elaborate than the last, a carefully curated display of privilege. Comments poured in from their social circle, a virtual chorus of admiration and envy. My father, who rarely posted himself, appeared in a photo raising a glass at the captain's table, tagged with the cruise line's premium package #. These displays weren't unusual. My family documented every vacation this way, not to share joy, but to showcase status. What made this different was the date these photos appeared, and what they inadvertently revealed about our family's priorities. Last Christmas dinner at my parents' house, I'd specifically mentioned Lillian's upcoming 75th birthday. I wasn't subtle. "It's a big milestone," I'd said over dessert. "I was thinking we could do something special, maybe even as a family." Lillian's mentioned wanting to try that new French restaurant downtown. My mother had sipped her after-dinner coffee and replied, "That's sweet of you, Amber, but we'll be on the cruise then." You understand. I did understand. I understood that a woman who had shown me more genuine care and attention than my own mother wasn't deemed worthy of a schedule adjustment. I understood that my family's Mediterranean photo opportunities took precedence over acknowledging someone who mattered deeply to me. "She's just your neighbor, honey," my mother had added when she saw my expression. "It's not like she's family." That comment stung particularly because Lillian had been more family to me than anyone sharing my DNA. She'd attended my university graduation when my parents had an unavoidable conflict, a golf tournament. She'd held my hand through a health scare 3 years ago, while my mother sent flowers with a card clearly written by her assistant. Lillian remembered how I take my coffee, my favorite books, and calls just to ask about my day without wanting anything in return. The previous Thanksgiving, I'd impulsively invited Lillian to join us at my parents' house. The resulting dinner was excruciating. My family treated her with cool politeness while exchanging glances whenever she spoke. They asked no questions about her life and changed the subject whenever she tried to share stories about me. Afterward, my mother had pulled me aside. "Amber, we understand you're fond of your friend, but holiday dinners are for family. It makes conversations so awkward when we have to watch what we say." What they had to watch was their casual classism and tendency to mock people they considered beneath them. Lillian, with her public school teaching background and modest lifestyle, didn't fit their approved social circle. As I scrolled through their cruise photos that fateful morning, a particular image stopped my thumb mid-swipe. My mother and father posed with another couple, glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Celebrating life's special moments with dear friends." They could celebrate special moments with virtual strangers on a cruise ship, but couldn't acknowledge Lillian's 75th birthday. The hypocrisy burned through me like acid. I kept scrolling, my resentment building with each glossy image. My brother's wife Megan had posted a philosophical caption beneath a photo of herself gazing at the ocean. "Life is about cherishing the people who matter most." The irony would have been comical if it hadn't been so infuriating. These posts continued all morning, a digital parade of conspicuous consumption and hollow platitudes about what truly matters in life. All while someone who genuinely mattered sat alone on a day that should have been celebrated. The final straw was my father's rare personal post, a family photo on the ship's grand staircase with the caption, "The Nelson Family Legacy." Nothing more important than family traditions. In that moment, something snapped inside me. Their carefully constructed facade suddenly looked not just shallow but cruel. I put down my phone and looked at my calendar, where Lillian's birthday sat marked with a little heart emoji. And I realized with horror that it wasn't just my family who had failed her. I had too. That Wednesday had begun like any other workday. I'd arrived at the office by 7:30, armed with my third coffee of the morning, and a to-do list that would take 12 hours to complete. My team was finalizing a pitch for our biggest potential client of the year, and as the newly promoted marketing director, the pressure sat squarely on my shoulders. During my lunch break, which consisted of a sad desk salad eaten while reviewing presentation slides, I mindlessly scrolled through social media. That's when my family's cruise photos began dominating my feed. Between approving graphics and answering emails, I flicked through images of sun-drenched decks and azure waters. Then my phone calendar alert chimed softly. Lillian's 75th birthday. The realization hit me with physical force. I actually gasped aloud, causing my assistant to look up with concern. How had I let this slip? I'd ordered the cardigan weeks ago, which I now remembered with a fresh wave of shame, still sat in its delivery box on my hallway table, but I'd made no actual plans. No dinner reservation, no cake order, no card. Nothing to mark this significant milestone for a woman who never forgot a single important day in my life. I immediately tried calling Lillian, but there was no answer. This wasn't unusual. She often left her phone in another room, but today it sent a spike of anxiety through me. I texted, "Happy birthday, Lillian. Are you around for dinner tonight?" The message showed as delivered but not read. The next hour passed in a blur of distraction. I couldn't focus on the presentation, my mind continuously drifting to Lillian. Was she sitting alone in her house right now? Had anyone remembered? Had she made her own birthday cake, as she sometimes joked about doing? At 2:30, we had our final pre-pitch meeting scheduled with the entire team and 2 company vice presidents. As everyone filed into the conference room, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable to me just hours before. "Jennifer," I said to my assistant, I have a personal emergency. I need to reschedule this meeting. Her eyes widened. The Westfield pitch meeting? But everyone's already here and the VPs. I know. I'll deal with the fallout tomorrow. This can't wait. I grabbed my purse, leaving my laptop behind, and headed for the elevator. My phone immediately began buzzing with messages from confused team members, but I silenced it as I reached the parking garage. The drive from downtown Chicago to our neighborhood normally took 45 minutes in afternoon traffic. I made it in 30, running 2 yellow lights and taking shortcuts through residential streets I normally avoided. All the while, memories of previous birthdays with Lillian played through my mind like a slideshow of my own failure. Her 72nd birthday, when we'd gone to the Art Institute and spent hours admiring the Impressionists. She'd stood before Monet's water lilies and told me how she and Harold had once visited Giverny on their 30th anniversary. Her 73rd, when I'd arranged for a former student of hers, now a concert pianist, to give her a private performance in his home studio. Last year, her 74th, with a small gathering of friends and the photo album I'd made chronicling our friendship. And now her 75th, a milestone birthday, and I'd been too wrapped up in my career and my resentment toward my family to properly acknowledge it. As I turned onto our street, my stomach tightened seeing Lillian's small brick house. No cars parked outside, no signs of celebration. The curtains were drawn, which was unusual for daytime. For a horrible moment, I imagined finding her ill or worse, punishment for my neglect. I parked haphazardly and rushed to her door, pressing the doorbell repeatedly. After what felt like an eternity, I heard slow footsteps approaching. The door opened to reveal Lillian, healthy but clearly surprised to see me. She wore a simple blue blouse and slacks, not her usual house clothes, but nothing particularly festive either. "Amber, what are you doing here in the middle of a workday? Is everything all right?" The normality of her greeting made everything worse. She wasn't expecting anything from me today. She'd given up on anyone remembering. "It's your birthday," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Your 75th birthday." Something flickered across her face, pleasure at my remembrance quickly masked by practiced nonchalance.
"Oh, that."
"Yes, I suppose it is." She smiled and stepped back to invite me in. "Did you rush over here just for that?" "You shouldn't have, dear. I know how busy you are." I followed her inside, noticing immediately that there were no cards on display, no flowers, no evidence that anyone had acknowledged this day. The house was immaculately clean, as always, but had the stillness of a space where nothing special was happening. In the kitchen, I spotted a single store-bought cupcake on a plate at her kitchen table. A solitary candle stuck out from the center, unlit. Beside it lay an open book and reading glasses. She'd been planning to mark her 75th year on Earth with a cupcake and a novel alone. When she saw me notice it, Lillian quickly moved to the refrigerator. "Can I get you something to drink?" I wasn't expecting company, but I have iced tea. "Lillian," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "were you going to celebrate your birthday all alone?" She busied herself with glasses, her back to me. "It's just another day, Amber. At my age, they come and go rather quickly." She turned, composing her features into a cheerful expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Besides, you remembered. That's a lovely gift right there." That's when I noticed she was wearing earrings I'd never seen before, small pearl studs that looked antique. She dressed nicely and put on jewelry for a birthday she was spending alone. "Did anyone else call?" "Send cards?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My bridge club sent a lovely email. And the church bulletin mentioned it last Sunday. She set a glass of iced tea in front of me with determined brightness. "Now tell me why you're really here, in the middle of a workday. You never leave that office before 7. It was her attempt to deflect, to minimize her disappointment and save me from guilt. That selfless act, putting my feelings above her own, even on her birthday, broke something inside me. "I'm here because it's your 75th birthday, and I almost forgot," I admitted, tears threatening. I've been so wrapped up in work and my own problems that I nearly let today pass without celebration, and I'm so sorry, Lillian. You deserve so much better. She reached across the table and patted my hand.
Now.
You're here now, and that's what matters. No, I said firmly, wiping my eyes. What matters is that you've never forgotten a single important day in my life, and somehow I let the most important people in my life, including me, forget yours. I looked at the sad little cupcake, at the woman who'd been more family to me than my actual relatives, and made a split-second decision that would change everything. Get your purse, I said, standing up. We're not celebrating your 75th with a supermarket cupcake. This birthday isn't over yet, it's just getting started. Amber, really, you don't need to make a fuss, Lillian protested as I practically pulled her toward the door. You have work, and I'm perfectly content with my book, and your 75th birthday happens once. I interrupted, already pulling out my phone. Work will still be there tomorrow. In my car, I made a flurry of calls while Lillian sat beside me, alternating between amusement and embarrassment at my determination. First, I called Jennifer, my assistant, and after apologizing for my abrupt departure, asked her to move heaven and earth for me. I need reservations at Maison Laurent for tonight. Yes, I know they're booked months in advance. Offer whatever it takes. I did that emergency rebranding for the owner's son's startup last year. And Jennifer? Thank you. Next came calls to Lillian's church friend Grace, who had a key to Lillian's house and contact information for her social circle. Within 15 minutes, Grace had agreed to make some discreet calls and arrange for several of Lillian's closest friends to meet us for dinner. Amber, where are we going? Lillian asked as I drove toward Michigan Avenue. First stop, Saks, I announced. Every birthday girl needs a new outfit. Her eyes widened. Saks Fifth Avenue? I haven't shopped there in 30 years. It's much too expensive and I don't need. This isn't about need, I said gently. It's about celebrating you properly. The personal shopper I'd hastily arranged met us at the entrance. For the next hour, Lillian tried on elegant dresses while I insisted she choose whatever made her feel beautiful. She finally settled on a deep burgundy dress with three-quarter sleeves that complemented her silver hair perfectly. Harold always loved me in red, she said softly, examining her reflection. For a moment, I saw not the 75-year-old woman before me, but glimpses of the younger Lillian. The woman who had danced with her husband, taught generations of students, and built a life filled with purpose. After adding shoes and a cashmere wrap, and secretly purchasing several other items to be delivered later, we headed to the Elizabeth Arden salon where, thanks to another work connection, they squeezed Lillian in for a styling appointment. I haven't had my hair professionally done since my 50th wedding anniversary, she confessed as the stylist worked. I sat nearby, continuing to make arrangements on my phone while watching Lillian's transformation. Not just physical, though the elegant updo certainly took years off her appearance, but emotional. With each passing hour, she straightened her posture, smiled more freely, and let herself be celebrated. By 6:30, we arrived at Maison Laurent, arguably the best French restaurant in Chicago and notoriously impossible to book without months of advanced planning. The maitre d' greeted us by name and led us to the best table in the house, a corner spot with views of both the twinkling city lights and the restaurant's elegant interior. Lillian clutched my arm. Amber, how did you manage this? This place is perfect for your birthday. I finished for her. And we're just getting started. The real surprise came moments later when Grace arrived, followed by 5 other people Lillian had known for decades, her former teaching colleague Robert and his wife Susan, her neighbor of 30 years Margaret, her bridge partner William, and her niece Cynthia, who had flown in from Milwaukee on 2 hours' notice after my desperate call. Lillian's hand flew to her mouth as they approached the table. What on earth? Cynthia? You were in Wisconsin this morning. Her niece embraced her tightly. I wouldn't miss your 75th for anything, Aunt Lil. Though I did need Amber's wake-up call to remind me how important today is. The 7 of us settled around the table as the chef himself appeared to announce he'd prepared a special tasting menu in honor of the occasion. Champagne flowed, Stories were shared, and Lillian glowed with happiness at the center of it all. During the second course, a delicate scallop dish that Lillian proclaimed reminded her of her honeymoon in Marseille, she leaned toward me. "How did you pull this together in just a few hours?" I smiled. "Let's just say I'm putting my professional skills to personal use for once." The truth was more complicated. Every favor I'd called in, every string I'd pulled represented connections I'd built while neglecting my relationship with Lillian. My career success had come at a cost, and seeing her happiness now made me question the bargain I'd struck. Between the main course and dessert, I excused myself to check my phone, which had been buzzing persistently. 27 missed calls and messages, mostly work-related, but 3 from my mother, unusual given that she rarely called when on vacation. I ignored them all and returned to the table just as the lights dimmed. The restaurant staff emerged with a stunning 3-tiered cake adorned with candles, while the pianist played "Happy Birthday." The entire restaurant joined in singing, and Lillian, overcome with emotion, gripped my hand tightly. "Make a wish," I whispered as she prepared to blow out the candles. After dessert and coffee, Lillian's friends presented her with hastily arranged but heartfelt gifts: books, a beautiful scarf, a framed photo of her late husband that Robert had digitally restored. My gift, the forgotten cashmere cardigan, would have to wait until we returned home. As the evening wound down, I stepped away again to take photos of the group, making sure to capture Lillian's radiant smile. Without thinking, I posted several to my Instagram with a caption, "Celebrating the most amazing woman on her 75th birthday. She's taught me what family really means." It was a pointed message aimed directly at my relatives and their cruise ship platitudes. I tagged the restaurant and added a few more photos of Lillian with her cake, surrounded by people who had dropped everything to be with her on this special day. As we prepared to leave, the restaurant manager approached with a small package. "A little something to remember the evening," he said, presenting Lillian with a signed menu and a box of house-made chocolates. In the car heading home, Lillian was uncharacteristically quiet. When I glanced over, I saw tears slipping down her cheeks. "Lillian? What's wrong? Wasn't it a good celebration?" She patted my hand on the steering wheel. "It was perfect, dear. I'm just thinking about how lucky I am. At my age, many people are forgotten. Tonight reminded me that I'm not." Her words cut straight to my heart. You could never be forgotten. Not by people who truly know what matters. We arrived back at her house just after 11. I helped her inside with her packages and gifts, making sure she was settled. "Thank you for the most wonderful birthday," she said at the door. "Though I still think you shouldn't have left work like that." I hugged her tightly. "Some things are more important than work. I'm just sorry it took me so long to remember that." Driving the short distance to my own house, I checked my phone again. The work messages I expected, but my mother had now called 5 times. Unusual enough that I felt a twinge of concern. I called her back once I was inside. Finally, she answered immediately. "Would you care to explain what you're doing? Your father is furious." "Hello to you too, Mom. I'm fine. Thanks for asking." "Don't be smart, Amber. I'm talking about those photos you posted. Making a spectacle with your neighbor and that passive-aggressive caption. What were you thinking?" I sank onto my couch, exhausted but still riding the emotional high of the evening. I was thinking that someone I care about deserved to be celebrated on her 75th birthday. Something our family apparently couldn't be bothered to remember. "She's not family," my mother said sharply. "And you've made us look terrible. Everyone's commenting about how wonderful you are while we're away on our cruise." "Maybe because it is terrible," I replied, my voice rising. "Lillian has been more present in my life than any of you for years. She's never forgotten my birthday or promotion, or shown up when I was sick. Can you say the same?" The line went quiet for a moment. Then my mother's voice, unusually hesitant. "You've never mentioned this woman was so important to you." "I have. Multiple times. You just never listened." I took a deep breath. "Look, I'm tired. It's been a long day. Enjoy your cruise. We can talk when you get back." "This conversation isn't over," she warned. Your father wants to speak with you tomorrow. After hanging up, I scrolled through the comments on my Instagram post. Friends and colleagues expressing delight at the celebration, asking about Lillian, commenting on how happy she looked. No one had ever responded that way to posts about my family. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text from Lillian. Thank you for making an old woman feel like a queen today. You are the daughter of my heart. I fell asleep with those words echoing in my mind, unaware that my impulsive Instagram post had set in motion revelations that would shake my family to its core. The following morning brought consequences I should have anticipated. My phone rang at 6 a.m., my father calling directly from the cruise ship, $13 per minute international rates be damned. What exactly are you trying to prove with this stunt, Amber? His voice carried the clipped tone he reserved for business adversaries and disappointing children. Your mother is upset, and frankly, so am I. I sat up in bed, sleep evaporating instantly. Good morning to you too, Dad. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was celebrating someone important to me. By publicly shaming your family, that caption wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be, I admitted, surprising myself with my boldness. Lillian turned 75 yesterday. It's a milestone birthday for someone who's been there for every important moment in my life. None of you even sent a text. We didn't know it was so important, he said dismissively. You can't expect us to track your neighbors' birthdays while we're traveling. I mentioned it at Christmas dinner. Specifically, Mom changed the subject to talk about the cruise. His sigh carried across the ocean. Amber, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. This woman is your neighbor, not your responsibility. We're your family. That word, family, struck a nerve. Are you? Because Lillian checks on me when I'm sick. She remembers how I take my coffee and what books I'm reading. She's never once made me feel like my career choices are disappointing or that I'm somehow less valuable than Jason. That's completely unfair, he snapped. We've supported you financially through. Money isn't support, Dad. Presence is. Care is. Actually knowing me is. A notification popped up on my phone, a text from my brother Jason. What the hell, Amber? Mom's in tears and Dad's on the warpath. Over some old lady's birthday? Call me. I need to go, I told my father. I have an early meeting. We're not finished discussing this, he warned. Actually, we are for now. Enjoy your cruise. I hung up, an unprecedented act of defiance that left me shaking slightly. Minutes later, Jason called. I let it go to voicemail. Then my sister-in-law Megan texted. Way to ruin everyone's vacation. Real mature. By the time I arrived at work, my family's displeasure had manifested in a group chat specifically created to address what they were now calling my public tantrum. I silenced it and focused on damage control at the office. To my surprise, the fallout from abandoning yesterday's meeting wasn't as severe as expected. My boss, while concerned about my abrupt departure, seemed more interested in the successful resolution. Family emergency? He asked when I stopped by his office to apologize. Yes, I answered, realizing it wasn't a lie. Someone very important to me needed me. He nodded. The team pulled together, and the pitch went well. Just don't make a habit of it. By lunchtime, my phone had accumulated 37 messages from my family. I ignored them all and instead called Lillian to check on her. I'm still floating on air, she told me. Cynthia stayed over, and we're having lunch. Would you like to join us? I can't today, but I'll stop by this evening, I promised. After work, I picked up dinner and headed to Lillian's house. Cynthia opened the door, greeting me with a warm hug. Thank you for yesterday, she said quietly. I should have remembered on my own. Lillian was arranging her birthday flowers in the living room, still wearing the new cashmere cardigan I'd finally given her. We ate together, and I was struck by the easy conversation, the genuine interest in each other's lives. So different from the performance-based interactions with my biological family. As we cleared the dishes, Lillian mentioned casually, Your mother called me today. I nearly dropped the plate I was holding. She what? Called to wish me happy birthday. Rather late, of course, but she said she'd only just realized the date's significance. The thought of my mother reaching out to Lillian sent a chill through me. What else did she say? She asked how long we've been friends. Seemed quite interested in our relationship. Lillian's expression grew thoughtful. She had a strange tone when I mentioned knowing your grandmother. You knew my grandmother? This was news to me. Lillian looked surprised. Of course. Ellen and I taught at the same school for years before she married your grandfather. We remained friends until she passed. This connection had never been mentioned by my family. But when I introduced you to my parents that Thanksgiving, they acted like they'd never heard of you. Something shifted in Lillian's expression. Perhaps they hadn't. Ellen and I were close, but your grandfather never approved of the friendship. He was very conscious of social standing. That sounds familiar, I muttered. After dinner, while Cynthia watched television, Lillian invited me to help sort through some of her birthday cards. In her bedroom, she unexpectedly pulled a dusty photo album from her closet. I've been meaning to show you these for years, she said, opening to black and white photos of two young women in 1960s clothing. Your grandmother and me, when we were starting out as teachers. I stared at the unfamiliar young woman who was apparently my grandmother, arm in arm with a youthful Lillian. More photos followed: holidays, teaching events, and eventually my grandmother's wedding. You were at her wedding? Lillian nodded. I was a bridesmaid, despite your grandfather's objections. As we turned pages, I noticed fewer photos as the years progressed until they stopped entirely in the late 1970s. The final photo showed Lillian with my grandmother holding an infant. Is that my father?
No, dear.
That's your Uncle Charles. He passed before you were born. I knew vaguely of an uncle who died young, but my family never discussed him. Behind this photo was an envelope that slipped out when Lillian turned the page. Oh, she said softly, picking it up. I'd forgotten about these. Inside were letters, dozens of them, in my grandmother's handwriting. Lillian hesitated before handing me one dated 1982. Dearest Lillian, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done for us. Timothy refuses to acknowledge where the money came from, but without your and Harold's generosity, we would have lost everything. Bernard's investment disaster has nearly ruined us, but your loan has saved our home and the children's education funds. Bernard forbids me from seeing you, says it's inappropriate, now that we're in your debt. But know that not a day passes that I don't think of you. When this financial mess is sorted, I promise we'll repay every cent with eternal gratitude and love. Ellen. I looked up at Lillian, stunned. You loaned my grandparents money? Harold did, primarily. Your grandfather's investment firm collapsed, and they were facing bankruptcy. Harold had just sold his manufacturing business and had the capital. It was a substantial amount, nearly $200,000. In today's money, that would be close to $500,000. Did they ever repay you? Lillian's hesitation told me everything. Your grandfather passed away before the loan was fully repaid. We never pressed your grandmother about it. So my family's financial recovery, maybe even the foundation of their current wealth, was partly due to Harold's loan, yes. She took back the letter gently. Your grandmother was my dearest friend. We would have done anything for her. But my family has acted like they don't even know you. They've treated you like you're beneath them. Lillian shrugged. Pride is a powerful force, Amber. Some people can't bear to acknowledge when they've needed help. My mind raced, connecting dots. My grandfather's investment firm had rebounded in the mid-1980s, becoming the foundation of my family's current wealth. The timing aligned perfectly with Lillian's loan. Do my parents know about this? Your father must. He was in college when it happened. As for your mother and brother. She trailed off. Perhaps not the details. I was still processing this revelation when my phone rang. My mother again for the 6th time that day. This time, I answered and immediately put it on speaker so Lillian could hear. Amber, we need to talk about your relationship with this woman. My mother began without preamble. Her name is Lillian, Mom. And I've just learned something interesting about her connection to our family. A pause. What are you talking about? Lillian and Harold's loan to Grandpa Bernard in 1982. The money that saved his business and probably laid the groundwork for our family's current lifestyle. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost the connection. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice tight. "Who told you about that?" "Lillian has letters from Grandma Ellen." "Did Dad ever tell you about it?" "It's complicated, Amber." That was a difficult time for the family. Difficult enough to pretend not to know the woman who helped save you from financial ruin? To treat her like she's not good enough for our precious family circle? "You don't understand the full picture," my mother said defensively. "Your father had reasons. I understand enough. And I think we need to have a family meeting when you return, with Lillian present." "That's completely inappropriate. This is private family business." "Lillian is family to me," I said firmly. "And apparently, our family owes her a lot more than we've acknowledged." I ended the call before she could respond. Lillian was watching me with concerned eyes. "I didn't show you those letters to cause trouble, Amber. You showed me the truth. Something my family has been hiding for decades." I took her hands in mine, and it's time they faced it. That night, I received a video call request from my entire family, my parents, brother, and sister-in-law, all gathered in their cruise ship suite with grim expressions. I accepted the call from my living room, having prepared myself for battle. "Amber," my father began gravely, "your mother tells me you've been making some disturbing accusations." "Not accusations, Dad. I've discovered facts about our family's history with Lillian Campbell. Facts you've deliberately hidden." His expression hardened. "The financial arrangements between your grandfather and the Campbells were complicated and private. So complicated that you pretended not to know Lillian when I introduced her? So private that you've treated her with barely concealed disdain while sitting on your yacht purchased with money that might not exist without her and her husband's generosity." "You're oversimplifying a complex situation," he insisted. "Business dealings from 40 years ago have nothing to do with, they have everything to do with how this family operates," I interrupted. "With the hypocrisy of preaching about family values while ignoring debts, both financial and moral." My brother Jason leaned forward. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here, Amber? Some kind of family confession?" "I want acknowledgement of the truth. I want an apology to Lillian. And I want this family to recognize that our precious legacy was built partly on the kindness of people you now consider beneath you." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "We've never considered the Campbells beneath us. That's unfair." "Really? Because when I brought Lillian to Thanksgiving, you treated her like an intruder. When I mentioned her 75th birthday, you couldn't be bothered to even send a card." No one spoke for several moments. Then my father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could discuss this when we return next week. A family dinner, to clear the air. With Lillian present," I insisted. My father's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "If that's what it takes to put this unpleasantness behind us." "And one more thing," I added, bolstered by their concession. "There's something else Lillian mentioned today, about her estranged daughter possibly having connections to our family business. I want to know what that's about, too." The shocked expressions on my parents' faces told me Lillian's offhand comment had hit a nerve. My mother actually gasped. "How does she know about Catherine?" my father demanded. "She doesn't really. She just mentioned having an estranged daughter and some connection to the family business. But clearly, you know exactly who she's talking about." My father's face had paled. "We'll discuss this when we return. All of it. Until then, I expect discretion." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence, wondering what other secrets were about to come to light and how they would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The week between that confrontational video call and my family's return felt interminable. I visited Lillian daily, partially to ensure she was prepared for the upcoming family dinner, but mostly because our conversations had taken on new significance. Each casual mention of the past now carried potential revelations. "Tell me about your daughter," I asked during one of these visits, trying to sound casual while watering Lillian's plants. She stilled, her hands pausing over the scarf she was knitting. "Catherine?" Why the sudden interest? You mention her being connected to my family somehow. I'm just curious. Lillian sighed, setting aside her knitting. Catherine and I haven't spoken in nearly 20 years. She was always strong-willed, determined to make her own way. After Harold died, she changed, became harder, more focused on financial success above all else. What happened between you? She married a man I didn't approve of, not because of his background or status, but because of his character. Carson Reynolds was charming but ruthless in business. Eventually, Catherine became just like him. The name struck me as vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. And the connection to my family? Lillian's expression grew cautious. Carson's investment firm did business with your family's company. Beyond that, I don't know details. Catherine stopped sharing her life with me once she entered that world. I nodded, filing away the information for later research. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I searched my family's company records. As a Nelson, I had theoretical access to the investment firm's archives, though I'd never shown interest in the family business. The online portal required several password attempts before I gained access. Once inside, I searched for Reynolds and found what I was looking for. Carson Reynolds had been a major client from 1998 until his death in 2006. His wife, Catherine Reynolds, née Campbell, had then merged her late husband's firm with Nelson Investments, becoming a significant shareholder and board member. The discovery left me breathless. Lillian's estranged daughter wasn't just connected to my family business, she was practically part of it. Catherine Campbell Reynolds sat on the board of directors, attended the holiday parties I'd always avoided, and likely knew my parents well. And no one had ever mentioned this connection. When my parents' cruise ship docked, they didn't immediately return to Chicago. Instead, they extended their trip with an unexpected visit to New York, delaying our confrontation by another week. My father cited urgent business matters, but the timing seemed suspiciously convenient. During this extension, I received a curt email from my father. We'll discuss everything Sunday. 7 p.m. The house. Lillian is welcome. Please be discreet until then. The day before the dinner, I visited Lillian to ensure she felt prepared. She seemed remarkably calm about the whole affair. At my age, dear, family drama loses some of its sting, she explained, selecting a modest navy dress for the occasion. I've lived through worse than an uncomfortable dinner. They may try to minimize what happened with the loan, I warned, or make excuses for their behavior. She patted my hand. I'm not looking for apologies or recognition, Amber. I helped Ellen because I loved her, not to create a debt. If anything, I'm attending this dinner for you. For me, because you deserve answers. And perhaps a better understanding of your family. Her selflessness only reinforced my determination to ensure she received the acknowledgement she deserved. Sunday evening arrived with ominous storm clouds gathering over Lake Forest. I picked up Lillian at 6, noticing she'd brought a large manila envelope. When I asked about it, she simply said, "Insurance." My parents' colonial mansion looked exactly as it always had, imposing, immaculate, and emotionally cold. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I spotted not only my parents' and brother's cars, but an unfamiliar luxury sedan. "They've invited someone else," I muttered, helping Lillian from the car. The front door opened before we reached it. My mother stood there in a perfectly tailored St. John's suit, her expression a practiced mask of hospitality. "Amber, Ms. Campbell, please come in." The formality in her voice was telling. The foyer echoed with uncomfortable silence as I helped Lillian with her coat. My father appeared from his study, drink in hand, looking grave. "We're in the living room," he announced without greeting. "Everyone's waiting." By everyone, he meant not just my brother Jason and his wife Megan, but also a striking woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed in charcoal gray, with Lillian's eyes and my father's rigid posture. Lillian froze when she saw her. "Catherine." The woman nodded curtly. "Mother." The tension in the room crystallized into something almost visible. Catherine Reynolds, Lillian's estranged daughter and apparently my family's business associate, looked simultaneously like and unlike her mother. They shared the same fine bone structure and intelligent eyes, but where Lillian's face showed warmth and compassion, Catherine's displayed only carefully controlled calculation. "Please, let's sit," my mother suggested, gesturing to the arranged seating that deliberately placed Lillian and me opposite everyone else, a visual representation of sides being taken. Once we were seated, my father took control, as he always did in difficult situations. "Amber has raised some concerns about family history and connections that we feel should be addressed directly," he began, sounding like he was opening a board meeting. "We've asked Catherine to join us as her perspective is relevant." "Relevant to what?" I challenged. "The fact that you've hidden your connection to Lillian for years? Or the fact that our family fortune may partially exist thanks to her and her husband's generosity?" My father's jaw tightened. "That's a simplistic interpretation of complex financial matters." "Then explain the complexity," I insisted. He exchanged glances with Catherine, who gave a slight nod. "In 1982, Nelson Investments faced a significant crisis," he began reluctantly. "My father, your grandfather, had made several high-risk investments that failed catastrophically. We were on the verge of losing everything. And Lillian and Harold stepped in," I prompted when he paused. "Yes," he admitted. "Through their connection to my mother, they offered a substantial loan. At the time, it seemed our only option." "And was it repaid in full?" I asked, already knowing the answer from Lillian's reaction. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Not entirely. After my father passed in 1987, certain arrangements were made." "What arrangements?" I pressed. Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice cool and professional. "My father proposed a solution. The remaining debt would be converted to equity in Nelson Investments. A small percentage, but significant." I turned to Lillian, confused. "You own part of Nelson Investments?" She shook her head. "Harold and I declined that offer. We didn't want ownership. We wanted Ellen to be secure after Bernard passed. But the documents were drawn up," Catherine continued. "And after my father and I entered the financial world, we discovered these papers during due diligence for a potential partnership with Nelson Investments. The pieces finally clicked together. So when your husband died, I used those documents as leverage to secure my position within the company," Catherine finished unapologetic. "Business is business." My brother Jason, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, leaned forward. "What Catherine isn't saying is that her position on our board has been instrumental to our expansion over the past decade. The arrangement has benefited everyone." "Everyone except Lillian," I pointed out, "who's been treated like a stranger despite being essentially an angel investor in our family business." My mother cleared her throat delicately. "There were social complications. Your grandfather was very concerned with appearances. Having it known that a schoolteacher and small business owner had rescued the Nelson fortune would have been difficult for him. So instead, you pretended not to know her? Even after Grandpa died? Even when I specifically brought her into your lives?" My father spread his hands. "By then, patterns were established. And with Catherine's position in the company being what it is, you were afraid I'd discover the truth. I realized that your precious family legacy was built on money you borrowed and never fully repaid." "That's unfair," my mother protested. "Your father has worked tirelessly to build the business into what it is today, with capital he might never have had without the Campbells," I countered. Lillian, who had been silently observing this exchange, finally spoke. "I didn't come here to cast blame or claim credit, Timothy. I came because Amber deserves to understand her family's history." My father's expression softened slightly at her reasonable tone. "What exactly do you want from us, Lillian?" "Nothing for myself. But I would like you to be honest with Amber. She values truth and authentic relationships, qualities I've always admired in her." Catherine made a small, dismissive sound. "How convenient to claim you want nothing while positioning yourself as the moral authority." Lillian turned to her daughter, sadness etching her features. "I've never claimed moral authority, Catherine. I've made many mistakes, especially with you." "This isn't about our relationship," Catherine said sharply. Isn't it? Lillian reached for the manila envelope she'd brought. Everything is connected. The loan to the Nelsons. Your estrangement from me. The person you've become. She opened the envelope and removed several documents, sliding them toward the center of the coffee table. I recognized some as the letters from my grandmother, but others were unfamiliar: financial statements, legal documents, and old photographs. What are these? My father asked, reaching for them cautiously. Evidence, Lillian said simply. Of relationships, of debts, both financial and moral, and of choices made over decades. As my father examined the papers, his face paled. One document in particular seemed to disturb him. A yellowed letter with my grandfather's distinctive signature at the bottom. Where did you get this? He demanded. Harold kept everything, Lillian explained. He believed in maintaining records, especially of promises made. My mother peered over my father's shoulder, gasping softly at whatever she saw. Timothy, is that? Yes, he confirmed grimly. Father's written acknowledgement that the business would have failed without the Campbell loan, and his commitment that the Nelsons would always acknowledge this debt of gratitude. A commitment obviously not honored, I noted. Catherine had gone rigid, staring at another document in the pile, what appeared to be a handwritten letter. She picked it up with slightly trembling hands. This is from Carson, she said, addressing Lillian.
To you.
Lillian nodded. Written 6 months before he died. He wanted to reconcile our families. I never saw this, Catherine whispered, scanning the contents. He sent it without telling you. We spoke by phone afterward. He was changing, Catherine, recognizing that his pursuit of wealth and status had cost him something precious. Catherine's carefully composed expression cracked, showing a glimpse of genuine emotion for the first time. He never said anything to me. He was going to. The accident happened before he could. The room fell silent as Catherine continued reading, the only sound the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. When she finished, she carefully refolded the letter, her movements precise despite her evident emotion. Why show this now? She asked Lillian. Because secrets have power only in darkness, Lillian replied gently. And because it's time for truth, for Amber's sake. For yours, for all of us. My father had been reviewing the financial documents, his expression growing increasingly troubled. These show that the original loan was significantly larger than I was told, and that my father, he stopped, seeming unable to continue. That your father deliberately misrepresented the repayment terms to his own family, Lillian completed for him.
Yes.
Ellen knew, which is why she maintained our friendship in secret even after Bernard forbade it. My mother's perfect composure had completely crumbled. All these years, the way we've treated you, and you knew everything. Not everything, Lillian corrected, but enough. Enough to understand that pride can be a prison. Bernard was imprisoned by his, Catherine by hers. Perhaps you by yours. She turned to me with a sad smile. That's why I've always admired your freedom, Amber. Your willingness to value people for who they are, not what they represent. Jason, who had been silently processing these revelations, finally spoke. If these documents are authentic, they change the official history of Nelson Investments. The narrative Dad has always told us about Grandpa's business genius saving the company was partially a fiction, my father admitted heavily. Yes. So our family legacy was built on a foundation provided by the Campbells, my father completed. And sustained by your sister's relationship with Lillian, which allowed us to keep pretending otherwise. The truth hung in the air between us, decades of pretense stripped away in a single evening. Catherine still held her late husband's letter, her knuckles white with tension. Does this change anything? She finally asked, looking directly at Lillian for the first time. Between us? Lillian considered the question carefully. That depends on what you want to change, Catherine. I've never stopped loving you, despite our differences. Something vulnerable flickered across Catherine's face, a glimpse of the daughter beneath the businesswoman's armor. 20 years is a long time. Yes, Lillian agreed. Too long. My father cleared his throat, visibly struggling to regain his composure.
Well,
This has been illuminating. He turned to Lillian with obvious difficulty. It appears we owe you far more than an apology for missing your birthday. You owe her acknowledgement, I insisted.
of who she is to this family.
Of what she and Harold did. Yes, he conceded, surprising me. We do. He straightened, some of his natural authority returning. And we'll need to discuss how to properly recognize the Campbell contribution to Nelson Investments history. That's hardly necessary, Lillian began, but I interrupted. Actually, it is necessary. Not for your sake, Lillian, but for theirs. For the truth. As the storm that had been threatening all evening finally broke outside, rain lashing against the windows, our family began the painful process of reconstructing its history, not as my grandfather had mythologized it, but as it actually happened, saved by the generosity of a schoolteacher and her husband, sustained by secrecy and pride, and finally exposed by a forgotten birthday and a granddaughter who refused to accept the status quo. By the time we left that night, nothing had been fully resolved, but everything had been irreversibly changed. Catherine walked us to the door, hanging back to speak privately with Lillian while I waited by the car. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the tentative embrace they shared before parting spoke volumes. On the drive home, Lillian was quiet, lost in thought. Are you okay? I finally asked. She nodded, gazing out at the rain-slicked streets. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals, Amber. But it always eventually heals. As I pulled up to her house, she turned to me with tear-bright eyes. Thank you for forcing this reckoning. Not many would have the courage. I learned courage from you, I told her honestly, and what family should really mean. She squeezed my hand before getting out of the car. Family isn't always who we're born to. Sometimes it's who we choose. And who chooses us back, every day, through actions rather than just blood. As I watched her walk to her door, I realized that in trying to right a wrong done to her, I had discovered something far more valuable. The truth about my family, yes, but more importantly, the truth about what family really means. A year has passed since that stormy night when decades of family secrets were finally exposed. Lillian's 75th birthday, which began with a solitary cupcake and ended with revelations that shook my family to its core, became a turning point for all of us. The changes didn't happen overnight. For weeks following our confrontation, my father retreated into his study, poring over the documents Lillian had provided, reconstructing the actual history of Nelson Investments. My mother vacillated between defensive justification and genuine remorse, struggling to reconcile her carefully constructed social identity with the uncomfortable truths now laid bare. Jason surprised me most. 3 days after the dinner, he appeared at my apartment unannounced. I've been thinking, he said without preamble as I let him in, about Lillian and what Dad told us about Grandpa and all of it. I waited, and used to seeing my normally confident brother so uncertain. I think I've been part of the problem, he finally continued. I accepted the family narrative without question because it was easier, more flattering to our ego. It's what we were taught, I offered, not quite ready to absolve him but appreciating the effort. He shook his head. That's no excuse. I saw how they treated Lillian at that Thanksgiving dinner. I knew it was wrong, but I said nothing, did nothing. His admission, so uncharacteristic of the brother who had always aligned himself with our parents, opened a door between us that I thought had been permanently closed. What changed? I asked. Becoming a father, maybe. He looked down at his hands. I keep thinking about what stories I'm teaching my kids. What kind of example I'm setting. If I want them to grow up thinking money and status are more important than decency and truth. We talked for hours that night, really talked perhaps for the first time since childhood. By the time he left, something had shifted, not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. My relationship with my parents evolved more slowly. Their first attempt at making amends came in the form of a formal dinner invitation extended to Lillian, not at their home, but at the Chicago Arts Club, a public acknowledgement of her importance. She accepted graciously, though she confided to me beforehand, I'm going for you, dear, not for them. And perhaps a bit for Ellen's memory. That dinner was stilted but civil, with my mother making visible efforts to engage Lillian in genuine conversation. My father, ever the businessman, proposed establishing a scholarship in Harold and Lillian Campbell's name at the university where Lillian had taught, a gesture both generous and safely public. Lillian thanked him but then added quietly, "What would mean more to me, Timothy, is seeing you develop a real relationship with your daughter. Amber deserves that far more than I deserve any scholarship." His discomfort was evident, but something in her words seemed to reach him. The following week, he invited me to lunch, just the two of us, no business agenda. We spoke awkwardly at first, then with increasing honesty about expectations, disappointments, and the possibility of something better. "I'm not good at this," he admitted after our third such lunch. "Emotional conversations. Vulnerability. Your grandfather considered it weakness." "I know," I told him, "but I don't." Slowly, lunch by lunch, we began constructing a relationship based on who we actually were rather than who he thought I should be. It remains a work in progress, but a genuine one. The most profound transformation, however, happened between Lillian and Catherine. Their reconciliation began tentatively: coffee once a month, brief phone calls, careful navigation around old wounds. Catherine's corporate exterior cracked gradually, revealing glimpses of the daughter who had once been close to her mother before ambition and a charismatic husband pulled her into a different world. 6 months after our confrontation, Catherine invited Lillian to her home for dinner, a significant step. Afterward, Lillian called me, her voice thick with emotion. "She has Harold's photographs on her wall," she told me wonderingly. "All these years, I thought she'd erased us from her life, but she kept his photographs." By Christmas, they had established a fragile but healing relationship. Catherine attended our holiday gathering, now held at my home rather than my parents', with Lillian as the guest of honor. Watching them together, their similar mannerisms and shared expressions visible despite years of estrangement, I felt a bittersweet gratitude for the birthday that had set everything in motion. Perhaps the most unexpected change came within Nelson Investments itself. My father, after extensive soul-searching and several long conversations with both Lillian and Catherine, made a public acknowledgement of the Campbell family's role in saving the company during its darkest hour. The updated company history, published on their website and in their annual report, finally gave credit where it had long been due. "Your grandfather would be rolling in his grave," my mother remarked when the announcement was made. "Maybe," my father replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe he'd finally be free of the shame that drove him to hide the truth in the first place." As for me, I found my own priorities shifting. The promotion that had once consumed my every waking hour no longer seemed worth the sacrifice of my personal relationships. I didn't quit. I still loved the creative challenges of marketing, but I established boundaries, reclaiming my Sundays for dinner with Lillian, making time for the people who mattered. When my company opened a satellite office in Milwaukee, I recommended Cynthia, Lillian's niece who had flown in for the birthday celebration, for a position that matched her qualifications. She got the job on her own merits, but the connection would never have happened without that impulsive birthday party. Small ripples of change, spreading outward. Which brings me to yesterday, Lillian's 76th birthday. Unlike last year's forgotten milestone, this celebration had been planned for months. My parents hosted at their home, with every detail arranged to make Lillian feel honored. Catherine came with news of a foundation she was establishing in her father's name to support education in underserved communities, a tribute to both her parents' teaching backgrounds that brought tears to Lillian's eyes. Most moving was the moment my father raised his glass for a toast. The man who had once been too proud to acknowledge Lillian's contribution to our family now stood before friends and relatives alike and said simply, "To Lillian, who taught us that true family is built on honesty, generosity, and love, not bloodlines or balance sheets. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." Lillian, radiant in a new dress Catherine had helped her select, squeezed my hand under the table. "From forgotten birthday to all of this," she whispered. "Quite a journey." Indeed it has been. The journey hasn't always been smooth. real healing rarely is. There have been difficult conversations, setbacks, moments when old patterns threaten to reassert themselves. But the foundation of secrecy and pretense that our family was built upon has been replaced with something sturdier, if less impressive from the outside: truth, accountability, and genuine care. I've learned that sometimes it takes breaking something apart to rebuild it stronger. That acknowledgement of past wrongs doesn't diminish us, but creates space for something more authentic to grow. That family, real family, is defined not by shared DNA or social standing, but by who shows up, who remembers, who values you for exactly who you are. And I've learned that it's never too late to right a wrong, heal a rift, or tell someone how much they matter. A lesson I hope I never forget. So if you're watching this and there's someone in your life who deserves acknowledgement, someone whose birthday might be approaching, someone who has shaped you in ways you've never properly expressed, don't wait. Don't assume there will always be time. Make the call. Plan the celebration. Speak the truth. Some relationships can't be mended, and that's its own kind of truth to accept. But many can, if we're brave enough to try. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of family, forgiveness, and finding what truly matters. I'd love to know in the comments, what relationships in your life deserve more acknowledgement? What truths need speaking? What birthdays should never be forgotten? Because sometimes it's the forgotten celebrations that lead us to the most important discoveries about our families and about ourselves.